Welcome into the Wellness Lab, the podcast that teaches you how to create your own wellness equation. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Marcus Philly. Marcus is the founder and owner of Functional Bodybuilding. He is a previous CrossFit Games competitor and all-around fantastic coach. We go so deep around fitness, nutrition, mindset, and really at the end of this conversation, Marcus demystifies how simple it is to take care of your health and be healthy and be happy and be strong in a world that makes it seem so challenging. As a father, as a business owner, as a competitor himself, as an Instagram celebrity, Marcus has got a full plate and he somehow still makes his health a priority and teaches you exactly how to do that through a three-step process. So if you've ever wondered how to make your health happen, how to get fit, how to get strong in a way that actually is going to work for you, not be impossible, and it's going to demystify a lot of the stuff that's out there on social media, you do not want to miss today's episode because we go deep and we get really, really clear for you on how to make your health happen in the simplest ways possible. Enjoy. All right. Welcome into the Wellness Lab, the podcast that helps you solve your wellness equation. Today, we have an expert and someone who does exactly that, Marcus Philly from Functional Bodybuilding. Marcus, how's it going, man?
It's good. It's good. Getting getting into the meaty part of the day right now.
Love it. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, I'm super excited to have you on the show. I'm definitely a fangirl. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm not. Been following your content for a long time, 5 years plus. And we're in the same backyard. You're in San Rafael. I'm in San Francisco. So I always love to have other leaders in wellness, in the Bay Area jump on this show and really highlight what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I feel like LA gets all the love. I want to really start to highlight what we're doing here in the Bay. So super excited to have you on, my man. Yeah, welcome in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm sure you get this a lot. You tell people you're from California, and they just immediately assume you're in LA. And they're like, "Oh, I'm coming to LA next week. I'll come and visit you." I'm like, "Well, it's kind of a far drive."
We're going to the beach. I'm looking out my window. It's June. It's gloomy out here in San Francisco.
Exactly. Right.
Well, great. I just want to kick it off with an easy kind of icebreaker. And what I've noticed and watched you over the years is, you've gone from a competitive CrossFit, professional to now creating your own brand, functional bodybuilding. And I'm just really curious, like what created that change? It's a pretty big shift going from the world of CrossFit to what you're doing. So I just kind of like to know, like, what sparked that for you to transition into what you're doing now?
Yeah. Good question. It was a two-part transition or two-part move because I was involved in the competitive landscape of CrossFit as a sport. I was also a CrossFit affiliate owner, so I owned a brick and
Mm,
mortar gym. Um, and while there was clearly similarities and they all kind of fell underneath the same brand, the the mission of both was different as I saw it. One was to go out and become a high performer in a physical sport, competitive sport, and do whatever it took to be a champion that I could, reasonably fit into my life. And then on the other side, it was just how do I get people to be healthy, to feel good, to look better, all the things that people want when they come into
mm-hmm,
a gym and they say, hey, these are my goals, right? So the these are my goals, the model and the approach that I believed in for many years was the CrossFit group fitness model. And now, of course, that had evolution to it, And what it didn't look like was what I was doing in my own time to become a professional CrossFit athlete.
mm-hmm,
They were very different. So my competitive CrossFit career was sort of coming to an end because I was approaching 31 years old. I put in 6, 7 years of doing it.
mm-hmm.
Not that I didn't have good physical years left in me, but my time allotment was sort of shrinking as I had just gotten married. We had a baby on the way, and I was also simultaneously really looking at my business and starting to recognize that the model of CrossFit as like the delivery tool to help people with the broad like spectrum of goals that they had was
Mm-hmm.
starting to not feel aligned anymore. And we can go into why that is, but I wanted to start making a pivot in how I delivered my fitness coaching
Mm-hmm.
and for the model, and it didn't align as much anymore with the original CrossFit group fitness model that I had started with about almost a decade before that. So I was pivoting my business. I was also retiring from the competitive CrossFit scene, and so those things happened simultaneously in 2016, which
Mm.
led me to launch my own business, which at the time was an online presence, doing some online coaching, but also this facility that we opened up in San Rafael, which is a couple exits up from where my CrossFit gym was. Hey, we were going to start a new style of training at
Mm.
this location.
I love that. I mean, I've got my own thoughts on CrossFit, I love how you're differentiating between like the guys and the women that are on TV
Mhm.
competing versus the person that's sitting at their desk all week, and
Yeah,
then Saturday they're coming in and doing overhead barbell lifts. So I'd love to kind of dive into that a little if you want to go there. Of
yeah,
what was it that you were seeing in the delivery of CrossFit in terms to like Gen Pop that you were starting to say, hey, like this isn't really in line with how I was training or what I was teaching.
sure. Yeah, I mean, look, the arc of CrossFit in the 10 years that I was involved in it was something that was obscure and nobody really understood and knew, to something that kind of became very mainstream and was the fastest growing global fitness,
Mm-hmm.
movement of the time, perhaps ever, at that point, right? If you look at total number of affiliates and people that were doing their continuing education and participating in the events and all the things. And
And I would say the community too. I mean, that was what always stood out to me is the community of CrossFit was absurd. Across the board, it was so tight knit.
yeah, it was very, it had a lot of the qualities, that people associate with cults, which or even religious, factions. It's like people were very devoted and loyal
Hmm.
to this method and this brand, and they love to share about it. They love to talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, I was involved in that, so I understand. But fundamentally, CrossFit was a a method of training that, at the pinnacle of it, was like intensity is the only variable we really are chasing, and we're going
Mm-hmm.
to chase the highest levels of intensity through any means possible. How do we make this more intense? They had a definition how they measured intensity through power output, but
Mm-hmm.
essentially it was in any situation that you come up against in the gym, we're going to try and maximize your performance and your output. So we're going to try and get the most weight, the most reps, the fastest time, essentially pushing people to find their threshold
Mm-hmm.
and then always chase that threshold. And now in fitness and in physical development, getting close to your threshold is important. It's essential. If you go for a very leisurely walk every day and you expect to be able to run a fast marathon after a month of doing that, you're crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because a fast marathon means you're going to have to run at close to your threshold pace. You never even touch that in your training, which is doing daily walks, and then you expect some outcome. Now, I know I'm using a very, very like simple analogy or example, but that is what a lot of people had done with their fitness for their life. They would go to the gym and they would do 3 sets of 10 of bicep curls that were, moderate weight. They never really pushed it. There wasn't a lot of volume. There wasn't a lot of intensity, and they're wondering why their muscles aren't growing. They're wondering why they're not losing weight. They're just, it is a very
Yeah.
blanket statement. It's like people just were not training that hard, and oftentimes doing it the wrong way without strength and muscle building. So here comes
Yep.
CrossFit, gets everyone training crazy hard for the first time in many of their lives, helps them to, because it's a growing fad and everyone's jumping on board, people are just showing up without really knowing what they're getting into. And it was like one of the first boot campy type places that really emphasized
Mm-hmm.
weight training. So now people are getting exposed to lifting weights for the first time, which was a benefit. So people working harder, people lifting weights, people feeling a sense of community and feeling motivated to show up and do hard things. All amazing stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's for both of us. That's at the core of what we're still doing.
Yes.
is that piece is we don't want to lose touch sight of. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. We don't want to lose any of that. Um, and then if you move through the arc of people, coming into CrossFit, you get 3 months in, 6 months in, a year in, and what starts to happen is that now people start to become more physically capable. They do
Mm.
get stronger. They do build some capacity. And when you're a beginner in those settings, um, it's very you're generally not that, you don't have a high power output or a high capacity to do a lot of really intense work. So intensity is actually relatively low for those people. It's the people
Yeah.
that got to the
Yeah.
6 to 12 month mark that started to like get better, that they now started to push levels of intensity that their bodies were not recovering well from, or they weren't treating themselves, thoughtfully enough to be able to do that. I started to
Hmm.
say it was like people started to train almost like professional athletes in terms of how much stress they put their body under, but they were recovering like nowhere near what like a professional athlete was doing. And so the risk profile of CrossFit as a method got very high. The
Mm.
risk to reward ratio was just starting to not feel favorable. And I was in the group that was like, but we can fix this and we can actually make it better, because all we have to do is get people to recover better and they're going to be good. We got to get them to eat better. We got to get them to go to
Hmm.
bed on time. We got to get them to stop drinking, But guess what? People were not bought into that, and they were showing up to Saturday morning classes after staying up late the night before,
Yeah.
drinking and eating and having a ton of sugar. And then I'm getting injuries left and right, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is just not working. And so again, that was just a very broad generalization of the whole entire arc of this thing, but it just showed up so like consistently and repeatedly, but like across the board. I was like, I can't
Yeah.
ignore that this is somehow really pushing people too close to their threshold in really highly fatigued environments with complicated movements, which got more and more complex over time because they were seeing people do these really sexy, complex things in the sport. And they're like, oh, I want to
Hmm.
climb a rope and do muscle ups and do snatches while I'm extremely tired that are 200 pounds and, all the things.
Yeah.
And it just started to get out of hand where I was like, this is like a runaway train that has, we can't rein it back in, or it's very difficult to rein it back in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, my wife was super into CrossFit when I met her and tore her rotator cuff, dislocated her shoulder doing overhead, probably Saturday morning, after being out. And what you're saying is a lot of what I've seen, and I've always liked the concept of CrossFit, but not the application of it. And it sounds like that's what you kind of started to see. Is this what started to kind of like, stew in you? If you're going, wait a second, I think there's a different way to do this. I think there's a way to get people to be strong and move well and not break their bodies down at the same time. Because I would almost say you could have kept with that, with the way you look and your brand. You could have kept just
For sure.
pushing that, But there's something. It sounds like there was a conscious choice in you that said, "Hey, maybe there's a different way to do this. I can show people a new way forward."
Yeah, well, I was a case of like, and most of the big transfer transitions or transformations that I've had in my life came from just riding something as hard as I possibly could until I broke, right? So
Hmm.
the first story was like at 20, 23 years old. Like I was pushing myself super hard to become a doctor. I was in medical school. Like I had just gone, call it 6 years of just dedication, devotion to this path of
Yeah.
becoming a medical professional, to the point where my body shut down, my brain shut down, my heart and my emotional alignment, my spiritual alignment was just not there. I was depressed. I was, sad. I was just broken as a human. I was like, oh, well, this isn't, I can't do this. This isn't my path. And that's when I pivoted to health and fitness, right?
Mm.
Um, with CrossFit, I poured all of my heart into that sport, and I rode it hard. And to the point where, when I wrapped up my last season in 2016, like my physical body was so broken. I was so
Yeah.
beat down. And it was like,
But you looked incredible,
oh yeah,
which
sure.
is
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I look
which
great.
is so interesting for you
I
to say
look great.
that.
I could squat 450. I could deadlift 560. I could do, I could
Yeah.
snatch almost 300 pounds. Like yeah, I could do a lot of stuff, but inside, and when I woke up each day, I felt burnt out. I felt broken.
Yeah.
I lacked motivation to go to the gym. All the things that, in hindsight, and even at the time, I recognized were like, this is what physical sport and like pushing yourself physically. Like when somebody finishes the Super Bowl, even if they won, the day after and the week after, no, they don't want to get in on the field. They don't want to put on
Mm-hmm.
pads. They take 4 or 5 months off to go and recuperate and get back into a good state of physical, emotional, mental health so that they can take on the next challenge of the next season. CrossFit was just relentless. It was like you wake up, you do it every day, no rest days. And I just had that, like it was time to say like, okay, well, I'm not training for the sport anymore. I feel this bad. I don't even want to go to the gym. And I'm supposed to be a fitness professional. Like
Yeah.
I clearly pushed something too far. And I'm the exception because I'm doing it at the highest level. And if I go back and distill it down into like what are the fundamental components of how I'm approaching this, there might be a better way for me to rebuild my body that doesn't involve doing CrossFit, but I also love aspects of it. So I'm not going to abandon all of it. But how would I take somebody who's in my shoes who wants to rebuild themselves with a strength and conditioning model and get them back to feeling amazing, performing well, looking good, and not putting the stress and the pressure on them to go and win, points and championships at the CrossFit
Mm-hmm.
Games. And so I started to, you know, look at my own training and incorporate things that I've learned over the past 2 decades or decade and a half, 15 years of training since I was like 13 years old. I'm 31 at that point. It's like, well, I did a bunch of bodybuilding. I did a lot of CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
I did, I was, an aerobic athlete at one point and to a certain degree. I spent a couple of years on the bike and really got into that. Um, and I still value, like, I had a lot of, you know, uh, joint pain and injuries that I was trying to rehabilitate and recover from. So I'm like doing some bodybuilding. I'm doing a little bit of CrossFit, the not super complicated or dynamic stuff. I'm doing some rehab, and I'm just sort of like using the gym as my playground to just sort of
Yeah.
cover like what helps me. I'm doing landmine, presses. I'm doing banded, abductions to work on my hips. I'm doing some pistol squats at tempo. I'm over here, doing hang power cleans to make sure I continue to keep some, force production power speed. I like the movement, but it's not a snatch. It's not as hard on my shoulder. I'm doing strict pull ups. I'm doing this stuff. And I was also very active on social media at the time. I used social
Mm-hmm.
media as a place to sort of catalog my training journey because some people were interested and I didn't really care how many people were interested, but some people were, and it was helping me stay accountable. So in showing all that in the end of 2016, the early part of 2017, I just got a lot of feedback from the viewers that was like, this looks really cool, man. You're doing CrossFit, but you're also doing this rehab stuff and you're doing some bodybuilding stuff. And man, that looks like what I want to do. And my audience, keep in mind, was predominantly a CrossFit audience that had been there with me for the past 6, 7, 8 years. And they were also kind of burned out on
Mm-hmm.
doing Fran every other week, And so and for listeners who don't know what that is, Fran is a named CrossFit workout that's kind of famous for its intensity and its squats and pull ups. But so, anyhow, they were resonating with it. I was giving more concepts and ideas and, food for thought. And that just sort of spiraled up into what I then termed as functional bodybuilding. I just literally made a very organic post one day. I had just got done doing a workout that I had a really great pump because I had done some,
Mm-hmm.
longer sets, time under tension, pump style lifting. I had done some CrossFit. And so I was like, oh, this is like, I'm doing functional training and body. Well, I was like a functional bodybuilding session. I wrote it in the caption.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that just started to catch on. And people were like, oh, I want to do your functional bodybuilding. And so that was really like the start of understanding and developing a philosophy around bringing these things together from the perspective of elite CrossFitter who learned how to be in the gym as a bodybuilder and now is
Hmm.
wanting to marry some of those things into an approach that feels appropriate for this phase of life.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Love that, Sharon. There's this concept in spirituality called transcend and include. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but to me, that's what you're talking about. It's like, hey, I didn't need to throw out what wasn't working, but I'm going to take what I like and take what's working, but I'm also going to transcend that into a new way of exercise, a new way of working out. And as a share, last year I was maybe 40 years old, and I just kept gaining weight, gaining weight, and I got up to almost 250. That's the biggest I've ever been. I'm usually around like 220, and I'm kind of having this moment of like, whatever was working in my 30s has just stopped. And kind of to you, like I own gyms, I'm a fitness coach, a wellness coach, and I'm going, something's up. This isn't working. And so I dedicated myself to making a shift. I actually bought one of your Persist programs
Mm-hmm.
early 2024, and it was just something about doing something differently, you know, in an intentional and an intelligent way. And I just noticed changes started happening. I doubled down on my nutrition, and over the year I lost about 30 pounds. And a lot of it was the initial thing I used with your program of just getting something done in a new way. My body was responded to it well, and focusing more on mindfulness, on nutrition, on recovery.
Yeah.
So I took a lot of what you have in your programs and put into my own stuff. And 30 pounds later, I'm going, that wasn't that hard. It was actually pretty simple.
Mm.
Not that it was easy, but it was simple. It was pretty, so there's this idea of sustainable intensity. I think you've talked about it before on some of your work. And I just love that idea of, we've got frequency, duration, and intensity in the gym. How would you kind of break out for the listeners of how do they create a sustainable way of training that's intense and, not going to run them into the ground?
Yeah. Well, first, let me just say that that's a beautiful story, and I'm so
Yeah.
yeah, I feel honored to have played even a small part in it. And oftentimes,
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate it.
it's something that we need a spark, or we need something that we can feel confident in to really challenge our belief systems about what's worked in the past and what needs to start to change. So congrats on the transformation that you made. And then yeah, you bring up a good those words. I guess you said frequency,
Yeah.
volume, and intensity,
Duration.
duration.
Yeah. Frequency, duration, intensity. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I think prior to really establishing like what is going to be my sustainable intensity, method, uh, I I like to really get people to understand what they can be consistent with, right? And usually, like if you're going to take this, which is not how we did it with CrossFit. If someone shows up on day one, we put them through a workout, and we just blow their hair off with intensity. I mean, the number of people that threw up in the first 45 minutes of knowing me is embarrassing. I really look
Mm-hmm.
back, I'm like, I cannot believe I made that many people, that sore, that, throw up, whatever, have that experience. And I didn't even know them, but, we learn from our mistakes and we learn from our past, if we're aware enough to do it. So first it's like, well, how do we establish you just to start moving in an intentional way consistently,
Mm-hmm.
right? For most people just rely on sort of luck or randomness to their movement schedule, and we need to create intentionality in that. So it's like I'm going to move in this precise way for this many days a week, and that's where we establish the frequency and the
Mm-hmm.
duration that they're going to be doing it for. So I don't really layer on intensity first. It's like let's just get you doing the thing, and
Yeah, let's
then
do something. Yeah.
do something, right? And you know, personally, my goal is to get people to do something every day. It's like let's understand the difference between activity and training, and know that activity is something that happens every day. Training happens, you know, 2 3 times a week for most people, maybe four
Yeah.
times. In some instances, five if you're a real hard charger, gym goer, gym rat. But as I start to look at like the landscape of 30, 40, 50 year olds that I talk to, it's like people who want to spend 5 days in the gym. It's not as much as the 20-year-olds
Mm-hmm.
in their early 30s. So, okay, we're going to get you moving every day. We're going to get you taking steps. We're going to get you doing some type of activity, but we're going to have to train because training is where intensity happens. Activity
Mm-hmm.
is not. So, your activity should be low intensity, low barrier. Just don't require much activation energy. Just get out of the house and move. And that's where I just we encourage people to take steps. That's why 10,000 steps a day
Hmm.
is such a powerful thing, is because it can more than check the box. It can really move the needle in your life in the activity area, but it's not really your training. And so this is where I see
Yep.
people. I've seen some social media clips out there where someone gets into hot water because they're like, walking isn't exercise, and it's like, okay, well, wait, hold up. Walking is activity. It's great activity, and it absolutely can be. It can even fit the training bucket for some very deconditioned people.
Hmm.
But what we're talking about, and that person probably said, like, hey, walking doesn't count as high intensity training for the vast majority of people. If you want to move
Yep.
the needle
100%.
on building muscle mass, which is why we should train, is we want to build strong bodies. That's like resilient joints, muscles that can apply a lot of functional, applicable force in your life. We
Hmm.
also want to build the tissue. We want to get your muscles bigger. People are like, I don't want to get big. It's like, you don't worry, you can't get big.
Don't
Like,
worry. We'll cover that if we
yeah,
get there. Don't worry. It's
if you magically put on 10 pounds of muscle, I want to study you. But if you're like most people, it's not going to happen. So, but yes, we just want to do those things. Those are really meaningful outcomes, because if you have more strength, that has implications on longevity. You
hmm
can go listen to Peter Attia talk about that in a much more scientific, eloquent way than I can. If you build more muscle mass, we're talking also about longevity and great health outcomes. And Dr. Gabrielle Lyon is the one that's really leading the social media charge on that. Muscle is
hmm
the organ of longevity. So it's like, we want
Yep.
strength, we want muscle, and then we want to do it in a way, we want to build those things where it minimizes the total amount of injury risk that you can possibly have. Because if you're injured, one, no one loves to be injured. If pain sucks, it's going to impact every part of your life. But it's also
hmm
going to create a barrier to you getting strong and building muscle and having it sustainably for a long
Yep.
time. So once we can say, okay, we've got activity covered, now we created a frequency and a duration of how much you're going to train, then we have to look at, are we making measurable improvements towards better strength and muscle and resilient joints? The way we do that is through intensification of your training.
hmm
How intense do we need to be to get you to build some muscle? And I go for minimum effective dose, right? What's going to
Yep.
get you to move the needle on muscle mass strength to the point where you're actually seeing the benefit in your life? For some people, that's 3 days, full body resistance training per week, and they maybe do 5 compound lifts in that session. They do 2 to 3 hard sets of each, and they're done in 45 minutes, and they call it a
hmm
day. And that could absolutely move the needle, and that's as much intensity as they need. If you say, like, well, I want to do a physique competition, then I'll be like, well, you're gonna have to do more than that,
hmm
and we're gonna have to
Yeah,
start
we're gonna have to
talking.
up the dose
We're
in
gonna have to up,
essence.
yeah, you're gonna have to up the duration, probably the frequency, probably the
Hmm
intensity, probably all of those three variables, because your goal is way up here. But in terms of like what the average 40-year-old or 50-year-old needs to have good muscle tone, continue to fight against sarcopenia or the loss of muscle mass over time,
hmm
maintain a high level of strength, and even improve their strength in those decades. It's not 5 days a week of 2 hours in the gym, bleeding out of your nose while you're doing squats.
Yeah. It's I just love what you're saying. It's such forward thinking in terms of this whole approach to wellness. I mean, if someone comes into Tribe and they say, "Hey Nick, like what should I eat and how should I exercise?" The first question I always say is, "Well, what are your goals?"
Mhm.
Like until you tell me that, I don't have any prescription for you. If it's just to move well and lose some weight, cool, that's easy. If you want to be in a fitness competition, want to run a triathlon, we got to do things differently. So it's relative to the person too, of their own goals, their own lifestyle, what they like. I mean, you and I love working out.
Yeah.
So it's not like going to the gym is something we dread. It's something we look forward to,
Yeah.
unless we overdo it. But it's like that's different than a lot of people. They're like, I don't even want to be here. It's like, well, here's what you got to do. I told someone the other day that they're 45% body fat, and she's going, what should I do? And I just looked at her and I go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can come to yoga and just roll around, and that's where we start. And I saw it just release so much pressure in her mind, because she had this picture of, I need to be here 5 times a week. I got to be killing myself. I'm like, you just need to show up. And
Yeah,
then we'll add on some intensity, and then we'll add on harder sessions, and then we'll look at nutrition. But I do that thing of, hey, just show up. That's step one. Until then, we can't do anything else.
for sure. Yeah. It's beautiful that you were able to offer her that in that moment, because I think probably stepping on a body scanner and seeing that, hey, I'm 45%, you know, body fat mass, can be scary. And then it immediately makes you think like, I've got an enormous mountain to climb, which they may have an
Yeah.
enormous mountain to climb, but every mountain starts with the foothills and you just got to start moving up
Mm-hmm.
them. And so, yeah, to be able to offer somebody that in that moment. And if anyone's listening and they have friends that are, in that stuck place that are probably just staring, they're thinking they're going to look up, a sheer cliff like El
Mm-hmm.
Cap that's just straight up. It's like, it's not going to be straight up. We're going to get you
Yeah.
started with something gradual. Um, but I do come back, and I mentioned some of these. I like to kind of use this pillars framework to talk to people about, you know, there's regardless of what your goal is, there's sort of like the fundamental pillars that move our bodies towards goals.
Mm-hmm.
There's, activity, which I mentioned. It's like we have to have a way of being objective about how much activity you're getting. And right now in like modern day, like this is such it's so problematic because people are really desk bound or they're really sedentary and just life is getting more and more convenient to just not move. So
Mm-hmm.
be objective about how much movement you're getting. And for that, I really advise people like get yourself a wearable that tracks your steps every day and just be accountable to those steps.
Yep.
The second
Yep.
piece is,
I had, real quick on that, I had Kelly Starrett on, and he said 8,000 is the number that they've found. 8,000 steps. Like, that's the minimum effective dose of, you hit that, and that'll clear up like 50% of your health issues. I don't know if you've got a different take on that. Is there a number, you 8,000, 10,000, or
yeah, I
kind of doesn't
mean,
matter?
my take on it is that the people I work with that are looking to lose body fat and really reclaim like a healthier weight balance, weight in their life, energy balance, that there's really no upper limit to how many steps, can move the needle on that. When
Mm-hmm.
people get north of like the 12,000 or more, they start to see big implications on their body fat levels and their body composition, their weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really say like, hey, this is the benchmark to get to. I like to evaluate where someone's starting and then be realistic about what it takes. Because 15,000
Mm-hmm.
steps, I have a lot of clients that do that every day. That really takes commitment to moving and stepping. And in many
Mm-hmm.
cases, they're walking on treadmills while they're working, kind of thing. So is that realistic in everyone's life? No. But if somebody comes in, they're like, oh, I'm really only getting 3 to 5,000 steps a day, then yeah,
Yeah.
8,000 is a really great goal for that person. Doubling your step count, is absolutely going to make sizable difference in, your health outcomes.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, before we move on, part of my weight loss journey last year was I got my wife and I a dog.
Yeah.
And now I start every day with a 30-minute walk. She lost 12, 15 pounds as well. And we can see the day we got our dog as our step counts double,
Yeah. Wow.
and it's incredible. I'm going, wow, having a dog is a huge pillar for health, because why it's forcing us to be active.
Yeah. Yeah. So checking the
Yeah.
activity box,
Mm-hmm.
I think that the other part that I really like dial in with people or really focus in on is bringing a lot more objective awareness to their food consumption. So, I kind of like anybody who says I have a clear goal, I want to reach this goal. I really make it mandatory to track your food, and
Mm-hmm.
tracking food before prescribing any type of like meal plan or macros or anything like that is also really important. Just, take the time to one, learn how to track food, two, improve the accuracy of that tracking over time. And
Mm-hmm.
then once you've done that, that's kind of like just get 8,000 steps, you're going to be better. It's kind of the same thing with food tracking. It's like just track your food.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even like follow a plan, just track it and you'll be better, because when you see it, you can't unsee it. And if most people are aware and knowledgeable enough that once they see that, oh my gosh, like this food that I'm getting is giving me so many calories and not a lot of nutrients, like
Hmm.
they just start to avoid those. They're like, oh, well, it's not worth it. I thought, and in most cases, they're like, oh, I thought that was healthy. I was only eating that because I thought it was good for me. And now I'm realizing that's not that good for me. So I'll go and
Hmm.
eat the thing that is good for me that I'm happy to eat just as well. So those are, those are kind of pillars number one and two. And when it comes to tracking food, I really just get people to focus on the amount of protein they're getting in and the total
Hmm.
calories as like the things that really matter. You know, do carbs and fats make a difference? Yeah, but they're very secondary to just, are you getting enough protein and are you really staying in a range of calories
Hmm.
that will produce results? People are like, oh, like I can't seem to lose weight no matter what I do, no matter how clean I eat. I'm like, well, you can eat very clean foods and still grossly overconsume calories in today's world. It's very
Yeah.
easy. You just walk into Whole Foods and the assumption is that everything in here is clean. Or if I go to
Hmm.
the prepared foods bar, they're making clean foods. I mean, it says organic, it says gluten free. So I'm good. And it's just really until you get down to looking at the numbers and having that awareness, you just can be easily overeating.
Yeah, and I hear it all the time. People come in with, 25, 30, 35% body fat. And they go, I eat pretty well. And it's in my mind, I'm like, well, you don't. The data shows that you don't, but how much of that is that person just genuinely believing that or not tracking that or not knowing? And the simple thing is, hey, bring awareness to this and what get measured gets done. And
Yeah.
eventually they go, oh, I didn't realize I was having 500 calories a day in butter or
Mhm.
oil or avocados. And it's like, yeah, there's some things. It's not even a takeout. It's like, what do you got to put in? And we teach the same thing: protein first, calories second, and then carbs and fat on the back end. Because as you go up the mountain, then the oxygen gets thinner, right? And you
Mhm.
got to start to pull different levers. But at first, activity, nutrition, and then I'm assuming the third is then going to be exercise, right?
Yeah, training for sure. And that's
Training.
what I really mentioned before. It's like, what is your training? What is your activity? They have to be, don't think about them as the same thing. Somebody who tells me, like, oh, I just love to play sports. I'm like, great. That's not a training plan. That is,
Hmm.
a recreational activity that I would love for you to be able to do every day. And there might be periods of time in your life where you get to do more of it. And those are the periods that you look back on and say, oh yeah, I was doing great. My weight was stable, but then I couldn't play, tennis 4 days a week. I could only get out once a week. And now I'm like overweight. I'm like, yeah, that's because you
Hmm.
didn't have a strategy to maintain a certain amount of activity that was not dependent upon you doing a recreational thing that could be fleeting and just disappear overnight if you picked up a new, uh, job, consultation gig that you are now putting in more hours for, right?
Hmm.
So back to the training piece, do you have a training approach or plan that is going to help you build strength and muscle? And if you don't have that, we need to find a way to incorporate that. Now, you can build strength and muscle a lot of ways. I just like to go with, well, functional bodybuilding, but like the traditional stuff, which is like push against resistance, lift weights.
Hmm.
It's just one of the best ways to do it. And yeah, there are certain like training facilities and gyms and that make it easier. Some people train at home. They don't have a lot of equipment. Maybe it makes it a little bit harder. But at the end of the day, it's like, is there a way that we can help people solve the training problem? And that's what my online programs are all about. It's
Hmm.
like, here's solutions for you to solve the training problem of trying to build muscle and strength without breaking your body down and limiting injury um, risk.
Hmm. Yeah, and when the way you just described that, it's simple: move your body daily, pay attention to what you're eating, and strength train 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I feel like what we're doing now is demystifying a lot of what it takes to be fit and healthy. And because you see so much on social media that's just not true, or it's misleading to get clicks. And I just really appreciate you distilling this down into basic things that we can all do. How would you how would you bring mindset into all this? Because for me as a mindset coach, I'm going, that's where it
That's
all comes from. And
first.
and a quick share is, and I'd shared this before we started talking. We have a mutual friend that I had found out recently that he had trained with you about 6 years ago after having a motorcycle accident. And what was so interesting is he told me that you and your wife told him you wouldn't train him unless he also got therapy at the same time,
Mm.
because you were able to see that he wasn't just broken physically but also mentally. He had parts of himself he needed to heal. And when he told me that, I mean, I said, I've been following you for a long time, Marcus. When he said that, I was like, oh wow, you're really walking the walk. Like, we're cut from a similar cloth if you're telling people that that's the core. And that really touched me that you guys cared that much. So that made me realize, like, you've probably got a lot more mindfulness and mental health stuff that you're working in the background too. So I'd love to kind of shift to that direction of, how does mindset come into the approach here for when we're training ourselves and when we're training, clients that need help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I let's see. My wife is a mental health professional, so she's a
Mm-hmm.
psychologist, and she's and I've been in and around that world obviously for the 15 years I've known her, but even for a decade before that, my own you know mental health journey. Um, but I think when you use the word mindset, where does mindset fit into this? It is or a mindfulness, like we're it's so easy today to just move through life without like just be a doer and not really
Mm-hmm.
connect to like being like a human and what goes into just being. Um, and so a lot of the things I just talked about are like the doing pillars that move the health needle. And then the hope is that over time, people start to raise their awareness of how these boxes that they're checking daily make them feel, how they fit
Mm-hmm.
together. Um, I always say that when we work with clients, like your true obstacles are going to get exposed here relatively quickly because your obstacle is not that you're eating too many calories alone. Like there's a reason why that's happening, and we're going to uncover it when we start to be accountable to this data point. But when
Mm-hmm.
we reach and we hit those obstacles, that's where your mindset comes into play. It's like, what beliefs do you have about yourself? What beliefs do you have about you know your value and how much time and space that you can take up in this world? you know what is your belief system around how you fit into um, the family dynamic that you're a part of and what your roles are? And in some instances, like, yeah, somebody needs to seek out um, mental health professionals to support them in that.
Mm-hmm.
And in other instances, they just need to have a coach or somebody just be the mirror that reflects back to them, like, hey, do you see how big an obstacle this is for you right now? Like, you have been pushing yourself for so long to fit this vision of who you should be, but
Mm-hmm.
that vision might be fundamentally just flawed or wrong or just misguided. And it doesn't
Yeah.
really suit you anymore. That was actually your vision of yourself when you were 31, and now you're 45 and you live a very different life. And that comes up very frequently. But like I said, there's often never a reason where people have to like come face to face with those belief systems or those
Mm-hmm.
that mindset. They can get through life without ever thinking about it. And so that's why I kind of love this idea of like, well, let's just simplify the pillars of like how we can make physical and health physiological changes. Let's get really detailed about that. And then when it breaks or when something doesn't work, that's like our chance to be like, hey, let's take a look at this more closely.
Mm-hmm.
What's standing in the way? And that is like, oh, it's a window into who they are as a person. And I love the broken, the breaking of belief systems that goes through the coaching process of trying to get somebody to lose weight. It's like we just
Yeah.
can really potentially unpack a lot here.
It's incredible how much there is to unpack, and I love to say that fitness is feedback. And I think we're kind of talking about that as like if I'm just sitting at my home at my desk all day long and I don't move my body and I don't get around people that are elevating their game, then I just I'm fine. And and from that lens I am. But when I step into a different room, whether it be in business, with relationship, with health, with nutrition, and you start to get feedback of like, oh, I can't even work out because I didn't eat today,
Yeah,
or I'm so stressed that I'm not able to be present in this exercise. And then you get to really have a conversation of like, well, is it the food, or is it the belief about food, or is it the belief about yourself that don't deserve to be healthy or lose weight, or have people notice you? And to me, I mean, there's the science of coaching, and there's the art, right?
yeah,
And it's in the art is where that's where I love to live with the clients, and I think you do too, of hey, what's really going on? But there's a trust that almost needs to be built, and you get people in their bodies, and then they relax, they get out of their minds, and then they start sharing, right? And it's like
yeah.
we're therapists at the end of the day too. That's always been a crazy part of this, the being on the other side. um yeah, so if fitness is one piece, then how do we approach the whole piece, then the whole picture? How do we put this all together in a way that people can understand and take?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I don't believe I have like the solution, by any
Mm,
means. Um, and I think that I mean, it starts with like conversations like this where people start to believe and understand that like, oh yeah, you know, this is more than just sets and reps. This is more
mm-hmm,
than um, calories and macros. Um, but I definitely, in my own personal life, I think, I try and cultivate that in our home by um, just broadening the conversations with our kids and with my wife about like how we're feeling, what our energy levels are,
mm,
how how did these relationships, how are you experiencing your relationships with each other and with friends? So like just really talking about, getting certainly for men and well, fortunately and unfortunately, like my household is all women. So I got two daughters and my wife, so I'm the sole man in the house, and I have to seek out other men, but to try and explore this with. But it's like, getting men to connect with their feelings, emotions, share that,
mm-hmm.
find opportunities to be vulnerable. Sometimes the best place to do that is in the gym, to be vulnerable
Yeah,
around
it
men.
really is.
Um, and yeah, just expanding, the conversations with clients and dropping seeds of this in these passing conversations, and then being an example of like, okay, well, Marcus is super fit, and he's like, got he's really lean, and he's like, okay, he's got these things that I physically, maybe I aspire to have, but then I can get on a podcast and share like, you know, hey man, I have a really rough year emotionally and mentally
Mm-hmm.
last year, and it really required this type of, soul searching, and you can have all the physical attributes that people aspire to have, but if whatever's underneath doesn't feel whole and is maybe feeling broken, then you don't really get to experience a lot of joy in any of those physical
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments. So just talking about it and making sure it's just part of the conversation too, I think is just helping to raise, some awareness around it.
Yeah, I love that share, and that's really what I'm feeling through. Is like a lot of this is simply the awareness. Like, oh yeah, I wasn't aware I was unhealthy. I wasn't aware I was unhappy. Now I am. Okay, well, like, but now what? What? Let's
Mm-hmm.
do a conversation like this. Reach out to a coach that'll help. Start to get in different communities, different tribes of people that are going or emulate things that you want. And I love the humanizing yourself piece too. Of hey, I'm a human and I'm here, having troubles. Well, this has been great, and I feel like we could talk all day about fitness, but we'll bring it in for landing. I know you got people to help and a business to run, but let me ask you like maybe a quick hitter for the road. If there was one non-negotiable habit that you do daily to keep your health and your happiness aligned, what would that be?
Hmm. I think it's probably, and this unfortunately is one that is really hard for people. It's hard for me at
Mm,
times, but it's going to bed and waking up at the same time every day. So starting and ending your day in a consistent rhythm, I think is it might be the most powerful thing people can do is, for their health. It's not usually where people start, but it really is extremely powerful. And so I would probably I'd start there. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. And then a fun one for the road. If we shut down your social media and you can only repost one piece that would be up there forever that would represent your work, what would that be?
It's not what I would really post, but I think about this like flashlight shining out of your butthole when you deadlift. I have a post that went pretty viral last year where it was like teaching people how to, keep a neutral spine, trying to shine your butthole light behind you. Got a lot of laughs. I'd probably go back to, I don't know. I think there's a post in there that was like 5 things I do in the gym to help me basically like age into my 40s or 50s or whatever. And they're really just the fundamentals of like what I value and what I preach, and yeah, something like that. It's like if I could have a legacy, which I'm not going to have that legacy, but if I could have a legacy for being the person that really made people value these 5 things to do in the gym, to just check the boxes that you need to prior to ramping up intensity, and everyone would do that. That was what I'd want them to see.
Brad, I love it. Keeping it simple. What's the best way for listeners to follow you and reach out if they need some help with coaching?
They can certainly go to all of the social media platforms and look up at Marcus Philly. That's where you can find my content. And yeah, you can DM me there. You can check out my stuff, and then it'll lead you back to functional-bodybuilding.com, which is our website where all of our coaching services are available.
Cool. And as someone that used those coaching services to help my own health and wellness, highly recommend it. 5 stars. Marcus, thanks so much for being on, for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge with our listeners. I know I learned a lot, and that was a great experience. I really appreciate you. If you're listening, I never asked for anything on this podcast. We don't run ads. We don't charge anything. So if this resonated with you, if you felt it, hit a like, hit a subscribe, and then send it to someone else who you think this is really going to help them transform their health, their wealth, their peace, and their happiness. So Marcus, thanks so much. If you got any last words before we go, feel free. If not, it's been an absolute pleasure.
No, everything's been said. I appreciate you, Nick.